Hello and welcome back. This is part 3 of my Roxas and Boxes metaphor. So for those of you who have not seen parts 1 and 2, please go back and watch those first. They give a lot of context that is really important and helpful in understanding the metaphor that I'm working with and just kind of this imagery that this is based in. So that'll be helpful in understanding what I'm about to say in this segment as well. But once you've watched those two, welcome. The topic of today, what I want to go over today is this question of, okay, so we have this room, right, the storage room of boxes with all of these rocks in it. We know what the rocks are. We know how important it is to pay attention to who the boxes belong to, right? Make sure that they're labeled and organized and that we have ownership for at least part of the boxes that are in our storage rooms, right? The next question that hasn't really been addressed so far that I hope to give some clarity on and kind of engage with a bit today is, what do we do with the rocks? So we have these boxes, that are full of all these rocks that, are ugly, dirty, dusty, jagged, sharp, heavy, whatever, right? How do we actually get rid of the rocks? What does that look like practically, right? I'm gonna again mix metaphor with the practicality of it, but hopefully the connection can be clear. The first question to kind of ask, as a follow-up to that one, is, well, what do the rocks represent? Because depending on how we're using the metaphor, the rocks can represent different things, right? So, for example, if the rocks are representing trauma, if we're using the metaphor for trauma, there are different types of trauma, right? And so those would have to be engaged with in different ways. Some trauma arises from an unmet need, especially in childhood, right? Or in our young lives, when we are unable to provide for so many needs ourselves. We rely on others, usually, adults, to provide those needs for us. An unmet need can definitely, contribute to a traumatic experience in childhood. And so how you would go about, those rocks would be acknowledging the need, recognizing what the unmet need was, and finding ways in your current situation to meet those needs, right? Other types of trauma can be a paradoxical problem, right? So a problem that doesn't really have a solution, where you kind of feel stuck and maybe torn between options. Nothing really feels like there's no way forward, right? And so what would you do with those kind of rocks? Part of the path there, and of course, I'm keeping it short here for the video's sake, but part of that path forward looks like finding and growing the capacity for balance and a tolerance for ambiguity, right? So kind of challenging maybe sometimes more of a reductionistic, prescriptive outlook on solutions, and looking more at a plurality, right? And growing the capacity for tolerance, right? Tolerance for ambiguity and for paradox, right? That's something that I love working with in my own therapeutic practice. So if that's something that you'd love, or that you want to kind of work on, definitely feel free to reach out. And that's something that I wrestle with a lot with my clients. So that, within trauma, there are some options there in terms of how we might approach that and what those rocks might represent, right? Grief, it could be other things as well, right? There are other things wrapped up in grief. But within the context of relationships and conflict, which is kind of, the main thing maybe, or the primal example that I like to use this metaphor for. And with all of them, really, with all of these different metaphoric potentials in terms of what the rocks represent, an important element is going to be acknowledgement. You have to look at the rocks for what they are. It's challenging this avoidance, right? It's looking inward, it's facing the fear, it's stepping into the discomfort, confronting the ugly. There has to be that element to it, because that is where we embody courage, right? It's where we challenge avoidance and avoidance cycles. It's where we like our coping mechanisms, and our triggers that we kind of fall back on, those habits, especially those that are more like automatized and kind of run, in the background of our mind, kind of on autopilot, and often away from conscious awareness. It's bringing those to the surface, right? And so there needs to be an intentionality. We need to hold and behold, those rocks. Look at them, acknowledge them for what they are. And a lot of that process actually doesn't always come in problem solving, right? This is one of the classic kind of butt head moments between males and females generically, right? Or is the approach to issues or difficulties. Men generally tend to have this kind of fix it type of approach, right? Where we like to offer solutions. And this is, kind of a common complaint that women have towards men quite often is, well, I don't necessarily need you to fix it. I just need you to be in it with me, right? I need you to acknowledge the problem. I need you to validate me. I need you to empathize with me. I don't necessarily need you to fix it, right? And both are important, and both have their place. This could be another video on its own, right? When and in what circumstances do we need fix it? When do we need solutions and structure, and when do we need validation, right? Part of it is a question of order. More often than not, we need validation and empathy, and we need to be seen and heard and understood first, right? And then once that's in place, the solution and the logistics of, okay, where do we go from here? What do we do about it? That can come after, right? But then there are situations where that solution is needed right away. Those are more, I'll just throw this in here for today, why not? Those are more the questions of in crisis, right? So when there are too many options, too many ways that something could go, and we are feeling disoriented and overwhelmed with potential choice, right? That is where we need just a solution that needs to be enacted to offer structure and security, right? So, but again, returning back to the original question of those rocks, right? Especially within the space of conflict, what you do together, with the person that you're brought to that room with, as you take out these rocks, you look at them for what they are. And you try to do so without judgment, certainly without finger pointing, right? This is your fault, this is your whatever, right? But you look at those rocks for what they are. You acknowledge it, you recognize it, you step into the reality of it, right? You acknowledge it in its fullness. And what happens when you do that and it's shared is that gives you a certain power over that experience, right? So much, and I say this quite often too, that the hell of suffering is found in the isolation of it. And this is, it's really at the root of therapeutic work. We could say it's at the root of religion also, Christianity specifically, that so much of the healing comes from no longer being alone in the struggle, right? So yeah, being in the therapeutic room, sharing your struggle with someone else, whether or not they offer, a solution, just being in it with someone, that already is so much of the solution, right? And so look at it for what it is, acknowledge it, and then you'll see that rock, as you share it genuinely with someone else, and step into just acknowledging it for what it is, it crumbles on its own. Just the fact of sharing it authentically with someone genuinely is enough normally to kind of conquer it and crumble it. And then you can just sweep out that dust, out of that room. So hope this answers that question, and I'd love to hear any additional comments in the comment section.